Hello, good morning, everyone. And today's topic of discussion is mechanical properties of dental materials. So, this topic will be covered under following contents: introduction, stresses, types of stresses, strain, stress strain curve, mechanical properties based on elastic deformation, based on strength, other mechanical properties of tooth structure, stress concentration factors, and conclusion. Coming to the definition, these mechanical properties are defined by the laws of mechanics, that is, the physical science that deals with energy and forces and their effects on the body. It's simply like force application on a body. Like if you apply a force on a body, it either tends to resist the force or tries to bend to the force or adapt to the force, or eventually, if it can't sustain to the force, it will get fractured. So that is what happens. See, the resistance of a material to deformation or fracture under an applied force. So all this will be called as mechanics. Usually the mechanical properties is expressed in terms of strength. Strength is an innate property of a material which will resist deformation or fracture. But if you consider strength, strength is dependent on the stress and strain being imposed on the material. So it is the quantity of stress in terms to the amount of strain it is subjected to. So that is why the mechanical properties are expressed most often in units of stress and strain. So whenever it is expressed, they can represent measurement of elastic deformation or plastic deformation or a combination. This elastic is reversible deformation, plastic is irreversible, or a combination types which will be dealt later. Now coming to stress. Stress is usually the force acting per unit area. This force is not the external force what we are applying. It's the internal resistance of a body to the external force. So when a force acts on a body to produce a deformation, a resistance develops to this external force, which is called as stress. So it is a force per unit area acting on millions of atoms or molecules in a given plane of material. It is force per unit area expressed in units of load per area or pounds per square inch or newton per meter square or megapascals. Now coming to types of stresses. So the direction of force determines the types of stress. Based on the forces acting on this specimen, it can be a simple stress such as a compressive tensile or shear stress, or can be a complex stress where there is union of two or other forces. Compressive stress. If a body is subjected to compressive load, like a squeezing or compression, then the force acting in resistance is called as a compressive stress. If a body is placed under a load that tends to compress or shorten it, the internal resistance to such a load is called as compressive stress and is associated with a compressive strain. It is calculated by dividing the applied force to the cross-sectional area perpendicular to the force direction. So coming to this picture where there is compressive stresses acting, the force application in this is two sets of forces that are directed towards each other in the same straight line. Usually the forces acting in the same straight line are called as uniaxial forces since they are acting in the same axis. The best example is the masticatory forces which are acting in the on the restoration or the prosthesis. That is, the vertical forces acting on the prosthesis is a good example for compressive stresses acting in the oral cavity. Now coming to tensile stress. A tensile stress is caused by a load that tends to stretch or elongate a body and is always accompanied by the tensile strain. So tension when the forces are directed away from each other in the same straight line. So this is also an uniaxial force. The best example is, I don't think you have encountered in fixed prosthodontics. It's like when you are replacing a missing tooth, you'll give a crown. So what happens when there is a sticky food like a caramelized chocolate? Because of the stickiness to the adjacent tooth structure or the opposing tooth, it will try to pull the crown. So this kind of pulling forces are called as the tensile forces that are developed in the oral cavity. Now coming to shear stress. Shear stress is produced by twisting or torsional action of a material. So it happens when a material is kept fixed at one point and free at the other end. The free end, when there is an application of force, there will be sliding of that surface over the surface that is fixed. So that is called as a shear stress. A shear stress tends to resist the sliding or twisting of one portion of a body over the another. It is calculated by dividing the force by the area parallel to the force direction. In the previous it was perpendicular, then since the direction of the stresses are vertical, here they are acting along the surfaces parallelly, so that is why the area is taken parallel to the force application. So in this, the two sets of forces are directed parallel to each other but not along the same straight line. So the best example is when you are placing an orthodontic bracket, then what happens is you will use a resin luting cement for bonding this bracket to the tooth surface on the anterior side. So whenever there is if the needle or any explorer is being poked in that direction, because of the debonding of the resin luting cement, due to the shear stresses, there will be failure of this bracket getting bonded to the anterior teeth surface. So that is one of the best example for shear stresses. But you can't encounter these stresses in the oral cavity, the posterior region, since there are no planar surfaces. Mostly they are curved surfaces, so they can't be any parallel direction of forces acting in those surfaces. Now coming to flexural or bending stress, these are called as complex stresses because they are not in single. There are two different types of stresses acting coaxially. So that is why it is called as flexural or bending stress. The effect will be produced by bending forces may generate all three types of stresses in a structure. For example, if you take a simple beam and load has been applied, it will cause bending of that particular beam. So the best example is a 3-unit bridge and a cantilever. For time's sake, I'll tell you the 3-unit bridge is when a missing tooth is present and is supported by natural tooth on either side, it is called 3-unit. Okay. When a missing tooth is supported by only one-sided adjacent tooth, then it is called as a cantilever. Here what happens, in a 3-unit bridge, there will be compressive forces acting on the occlusal side and tensional forces acting on the lower side. That will keep the tooth, that is the prosthetic tooth, in position. Similarly, in a cantilever, the vice versa. The tensional forces will be on the occlusal side and compressive forces will be on the gingival side. So there is combination of forces acting here. So this is a best example for flexural forces. Now coming to strain. Strain is nothing but the deformation occurring because of the applied forces in the given material is called as a strain. That is an elongation or any shrink, whatever it is, change in length to the original length or change in dimension to the original dimension is calculated as strain. The strain is defined as change in length per usual initial length. It is the deformation and it has got no units because both length or area is calculated in same units, inch by inch. So see in the diagram, when it is elongated or tensile force is applied, there is deviation. Delta L by L is a strain. Now coming to stress strain curve. See, I'll just draw a small curve here for you people to get understand. So this is a stress strain curve when a transverse tensile strength is being put over in a material to bring about the elongation or stretch of a material. Usually we'll use tensile loading only because it is easier to carry out the test with a tensile load rather than compressive. So, and the results are also promising, that's why. So we get a curve when we plot a stress along y-axis and strain along x-axis. In this graph will be something like this. Okay, and here for this I'll just tell you an example, like take a rubber band between your two fingers or a spring between your two hands, okay, and try to stretch it. What happens if you stretch it till a point and if you revert the force or cessate the force, what happens, it will come back or recoil to its original shape. So till that point it is said to be elastic. That is, whenever the material is able to recoil to its original position, it is called elastic. So until that portion, this linear portion of the line represents the elastic portion. So till the point the material elastic is called as the elastic limit. Till that point the stress is directly proportional to strain. That is, if you apply more stress, then the strain will be more. If you apply less stress, strain will be less. So that is called as the elastic limit or proportional limit. Both theoretically means the same, but slight difference in the definition. Proportional is proportionality of stress and strain is expressed, whereas elastic is, it is the elastic behavior, that is ability to recoil to its original shape is expressed in the definition. That's it. Okay. Now after that elastic point, consider this orange dot is elastic point. Okay. Till that point, if you take y by x, that is this portion is the stress, this portion is the strain. If you divide the stress by strain, the slope will represent the modulus of elasticity of a material. Okay, modulus of elasticity is the stress by strain till the proportional limit. Is it clear till now? So we have covered everything under elastic region. Okay, so until this region it is called as the elastic region. Okay, and the amount of energy that is being absorbed by the material till the proportional limit is called as the resiliency of the material. Okay, so this entire area present here will represent the resiliency of the material. Okay, now let's take another color. Okay, so what happens if you have got your rubber bands, right, or spring? What you'll do is, now try to apply more force. So if you apply more force, what happens is they try to elongate beyond a point. So the elasticity will be gone. There will be a slight plasticity, that is elongation happening in the material. So consider this point is the start of the plasticity, because you can't exactly point out a point where the elasticity has stopped and plasticity has been attained. So in that case you will take an offset, that is 0.2% offset is being taken by the scientist, and that point is taken as this point is considered as the yield point or the yield stress. Okay, after which if you continuously apply the force, the substance or the spring or rubber band will try to elongate till an extent. Okay, after which even though you are applying a force, this tries to fail and get fatigued or fracture at one point. So the maximum point until which it will exhibit the plasticity is called the ultimate tensile strength, and the point where it gets break is called as the fatigue fracture point. Okay, now the area which is present till the ultimate tensile strength in the graph is called as the toughness. Okay, it is the amount of energy that is absorbed by the material till the point of plasticity, maximum plasticity, is called as the ultimate tensile strength. Is it clear now? So you will have the elastic limit or the proportional limit, yield stress or yield point, ultimate tensile strength. Okay, so everything is being dealt here. So if you are very thorough with this diagram, so you can easily get into the actual subject. Now let's get into the PPT. So this is a stress strain curve. A tensile load, as I said, has been applied to a wire in small increments until it breaks. So if each stress is plotted on a vertical coordinate and the corresponding strain is plotted on the horizontal coordinate, a curve is obtained. It is called as stress strain curve. So this green portion will indicate the elastic region, the plastic region in lighter gray shade. Okay, so this graph there is little confusion because he has not given any elastic point and he has given only the yield stress and ultimate stress and failure point. Okay, now coming to Hooke's law. Hooke's law is he states that within the elastic limit, that is within the proportional elastic limit, stress is directly proportional to strain. That means whenever you are increasing the stress, the strain will get increased. The stress strain curve will be linear, and the material also behaves elastically. That means it will spring back to its original size and shape the instant force, the moment the force is removed. So beyond that point, what happens? The line becomes non-linear, okay, and the stress is no longer proportional to strain. Now it's really easy if you understand this graph. The further slides will be just like a cakewalk for you. Just see, the mechanical properties based on elastic deformation is elastic modulus. It's also called as Young's modulus or modulus of elasticity. That is nothing but the slope portion, as we already told. Elastic modulus describes the relative stiffness or rigidity of a material. It means if the slope portion is more steeper, it means the material is more stiffer. See, this gradient is measured by the slope of the elastic region of the stress strain graph. If the stress below the proportional limit is divided by the corresponding strain value, a constant proportionality will be obtained, that is known as the elastic modulus, and it is designated by Eon. E is equal to stress by strain. Now it is measured in giganewtons per square meter or gigapascals. So elastic modulus of enamel is 3 times more than that of dentin. So what do you understand? This elastic modulus is, it indicates the stiffness or rigidity. That means the enamel is more stiffer than dentin. That means the enamel is having more elastic properties than dentin. Okay. And there is one more consideration that you have to observe here in the stress strain curve. Usually in the stress strain curve for a ductile materials will be like this, whereas for a brittle materials it will be something like this. So the red portion, this point is called as the elastic limit. Here it is called as the elastic limit. That is, for ductile materials there will be even the plastic portion of the graph, whereas for brittle materials, after the elastic limit, the material will get fractured. That means there is no plastic portion or a limited plastic portion of the graph. This you have to get it. Now get into the point. So enamel is stiffer, as we know, it is stiffer but brittle. Why brittle? Because it has not got any plastic portion of the graph. So that is why it is more brittle than dentin, whereas dentin is more plastic. That means it has got more toughness, which is the area under the plastic portion. Okay. Now coming to its applications, the metal frame of a metal ceramic bridge, if you are considering a PFM crown, the metal should be stiffer. Why? Because if it is not stiffer, it cannot support the corresponding veneer of porcelain that is present on it, because it might crack and separate. That is why the material is required a stiffness or modulus of elasticity to be more. Another application is polyether, which you will use as an impression material. It is more stiffer. That is why when you are trying to remove it from the undercut, you will have difficulty. You have to give more force for removal. Next, coming to flexibility. This is somewhat not dealt in the curve, but it is related to the curve. See, flexibility is, you have got that stress strain curve, no? In that, the strain portion of the graph till the proportional limit is called as the flexibility. Did you understand this? See, if you take the stress strain graph till the proportional limit, this strain portion of the graph is called the flexibility. That is, it is defined as a strain that occurs when a material is stressed to its proportional limit. It means if the material has got more strain or deformation within the proportional limit, it is said to have more flexibility. Okay, where it is applied, the application is in the orthodontic appliance. When you are placing an appliance with light force only, you require the more elongation to happen in the mouth, because you can't apply more force there. So that is where you will require the flexibility of the material. Now coming to resilience, this is already dealt in the graph. The area under the proportional limit is called as a resiliency, but you can't tell it like area under, no. So that is why you're giving it a definition. It is nothing but the amount of energy that is absorbed within a unit volume of the structure when it is stressed to its proportional limit. The same wise toughness also goes. Toughness is also the amount of energy that is absorbed. Resiliency also the amount of energy that is absorbed, but within the proportional limit is resiliency, within the ultimate fatigue point is toughness. Okay, resiliency is measured by the area under elastic portion of stress strain graph. So here it is. Now you will have a complete picture of it, right? Now coming to the application, the restorative material should exhibit a moderately higher elastic modulus and relatively lower resiliency, thereby limiting the elastic strain that is produced. So it should have more stiffness for a restorative material, whereas resiliency should be low. That means it should not get more strained. If it is more strained, then it will impose more forces on the tooth or the adjacent tooth, isn't it? If it is strained means it is getting elongated, right? So it is imposing some forces on the tooth. So look into the example. You have got inlay. You know what is inlay? Inlay is like if you are preparing a cavity and restoring it with amalgam, then it is a restoration. If the same cavity is done with a casting metal, okay, you will replicate the cavity with impression and take a casting out of it. That is called as an inlay. So in that inlay, if there is more strain happening, then what happens? It will cause elongation of the material and it will impose forces to the tooth of where it is placed or to the adjacent tooth. So that is bad, no? So that is why you don't require a higher resiliency of the material. You require more stiffness and low resiliency for such restorative materials. Now coming to Poisson's ratio. This is also very simple. I'll tell you. See, whenever a substance or a block is subjected to tensile strength or tensile forces, that means you are elongating it. What happens? It will elongate as well as it will thin out in this direction, right? So what happens? There is change in horizontal, that is lateral, as well as the axial side. So this ratio is called as the Poisson's ratio. During axial loading, in tension or compression, there is simultaneous axial to lateral strain. So within the elastic limit, the ratio of these two is called as the Poisson's ratio. Okay. And usually the ideal Poisson's ratio should be 0.5. Most of the materials will fall under 0.3 only. Okay. Now coming to mechanical properties based on strength. Okay, strength, you know, it is an innate property which would resist deformation or fracture. So it is why it is resisting deformation. If you look into the molecular level, what happens? There are more atoms. So because of the interatomic forces or the bonds that are present, it is resisting this deformation. So more forceful the bonds or more covalent bonds are present, there will be more resistance. Okay. Now coming to the properties which are discussed in the based on strength. So these are the properties. Let's get into it. Okay, here comes the proportional limit. We already know that proportional limit is the point, the limit or the point up to which the stress is directly proportional to strain. Okay, so it is defined as the maximum stress that a material can withstand without deviation from the proportionality of stress to strain. So the region of the stress strain below the proportional limit is called. So the region of the stress strain graph below the proportional limit is called as the elastic limit. Since when the stress is removed, the material will return to its original dimension, and the application beyond the proportional limit will result in permanent deformation in the graph, which is a plastic region. So we already know this proportional limit, and I already told you this is yield stress point is wrong. That is a proportional limit. That should be the proportional limit in elastic region and the plastic region. Elastic limit is, it is differing only with the proportional limit in terms of definition. That is, still the elasticity is maintained. That is, as the stress, greatest stress in which material can be subjected such that it returns to its original dimension when the force is released. For all practical purposes, proportional elastic limits represent the same stress within the structure. Terms are often used interchangeably, but they differ in fundamental concept, that is, one deals with proportionality of stress strain, whereas other describes the elastic behavior of the material. So it is clear now. Is it clear now? So the elastic region, the elastic limit, here also the elastic limit should be somewhere in the red line, and that green point should be the yield stress. Okay, now coming to yield strength or yield stress, we already know till the offset point where there is start of plasticity is called as the elastic stress. It's also called elastic strength or proof stress. The stress at which the material exhibits a specified limiting deviation from proportionality of stress to strain. It is the stress at which the material begins to function in a plastic manner. That is, it represents the stress value at which small amount of plastic strain has occurred. So application is when you are shaping an orthodontic appliance or adjusting a clasp on removable partial denture, then you will require more of yield strength. Now coming to the ultimate tensile strength. So it is the maximum stress that a material can withstand before failure in tension or tensile stress within a structure at the point of rupture. You also know that it is it is just below the point of rupture. That is the maximum stress that can be withstanded by the material. So where is its application is the brittle materials. We already seen two graphs, one for ductile and one for brittle. Brittle material will have a lower tensile strength because of their inability to sustain this plastic deformation. Thus, the failure of all the brittle materials such as amalgams, composites and ceramics is most often associated with their lower tensile strength. So this brittle material, they won't have the plastic portion of the graph, so the ultimate tensile strength will be low. That is why they couldn't sustain this fracture. Okay. Now coming to flexural strength or transverse strength or modulus of rupture. This definition itself, that is the name itself, tells you what is in there. Rupture means the point of break. So it is a force per unit area at the point of fracture of a test specimen subject to a flexural loading obtained when using a beam supported at each end and load is applied in the middle, which is called the 3-point bending test. And this test determines the strength and amount of distortion that is expected. So application is that this modulus of rupture is used for comparing denture based materials, usually used because these denture based materials will be subjected to all kinds of flexural stresses, multi-directional stresses. So that is why it is mostly used for comparing denture based materials. Okay, so these are the different material transverse strengths. Now coming to fatigue strength. Fatigue strength is something like if a person goes to gym and usually gets fatigued to a point, right, after doing strenuous exercise. So that is what, if you are subjecting the material to continuous load or cyclic loading, then it is called as fatigue strength. Okay, at a point it will get fatigued, that is called fatigue strength. Fatigue strength is the stress at which the material fails under repeated or cyclic loading. When stress is applied to a structure and subsequent relief, the material should return to its original form without any change in its internal structure. When the stress is frequently repeated, the strength of the material may be drastically reduced and lead to development of microcracks. So this microcracks which coalesce to form the macrocracks and ultimately will cause the failure. So it is because of the application of loads there will be innate microcracks, and after which macrocracks, and then failure of the material. So it in turn depends upon the magnitude of load and number of loading cycles. Okay, so see this graph. Here what happens? The cyclic stress, if you are giving this cyclic stress is represented in y-axis. So the lower portion will have lower value 0, 10, 20 like that. Here it will be more number of cycles. If only a 10 stress is applied, that means compared to 0 stress, the 10 stress will require less number of cycles. That is, lesser the stress requires more number of cycles to get the material to get fatigued. Okay. The stress at which the sample of material can be loaded infinite number of times without failing is eventually called as the endurance limit. That means if you're like an athlete, what he'll do, he'll be continuously doing without getting fatigued. So his endurance limit is more. For application, for brittle materials with rough surfaces, the endurance limit will be lower. Why? Because of the rougher surface, it will have more microcracks propagation and the fatigue will be more. So in that, if you polish the material, you can increase the endurance limit. For a given applied stress, the rougher material would fail in fewer number of cycles. Now coming to impact strength. Impact is if you are hit by someone with a blow, like a blow or something, then it is called as an impact. The same way, if a moving object is colliding a stationary object, the stationary object could resist few number of impacts only before breaking. So the amount of energy that is absorbed by the stationary object because of the number of impacts, it is called as the impact strength. So it may be defined as the energy required to fracture a material under an impact force. So the term impact is used to describe the reaction of a stationary object or collision with a moving object. See, the instruments used are Charpy's type impact tester and IZOD impact tester. See this instrument, this Charpy's instrument, what it does is, it will be moving, this rotating pendulum like thing will be moving and hitting this block which is present for testing. So the more amount of impacts, the more it is sustaining, it is said to have more impact strength. Okay, the impact resistance of a material is determined from the total energy absorbed by the material before fracture when struck by a sudden blow. A material with low elastic modulus and high tensile strength is more resistant to impact forces and vice versa. Same thing only, no? Like if you have more tensile strength, that means you will have more plastic portion of the graph. So it could resist more impact forces rather than the material with no or less tensile strength, because less tensile strength means the graph portion will be less, so the timing for cyclic loading, the timing for the impact will be less, so in that case the impact strength will be low. So till here we'll be completing the mechanical properties of dental materials part 1. So you have learnt about stress, types of stresses, and strain, stress strain curve, and the stress strain curve, various properties that are dealt in the curve itself. Other than that, you will be noting this impact strength and flexibility, all these things. Okay, other than the curve, you have learned only few things. So this is what see you all in the next class. Thanks for your patience listening.